What's up, and welcome back to Talking Nutrition. Today's episode 85. We're going to continue the digestion. I just always have to laugh when Kristine's here. We're going to continue the
that
digestion
countdown gets us
topic
every
from.
time.
I know it's so when we hit record, it counts down from 5, which is already like an awkward number. But then it just sets starting for ages, and we're just here like waiting. But we got it. We're recording. We're good to go. I really like that we are breaking this up into 2, because I think it's one of those topics where, I mean, it could be like a whole like season of episodes. You know, it's a lot of basic stuff usually. So let's pick it up from where we left off. Last time we finished the podcast with fiber, right? Overdoing that. We talked about under eating, chronic dieting. We talked about stressing about being bloated. Just like not chewing your food, right? Lack of a morning routine, rushing, not sleeping enough, over exercising, a whole bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there's more.
Mm-hmm.
But wait, there's more. So today we're going to continue with eating too much protein, first of all.
Yes. So eating too much protein, especially in one sitting, it's kind of similar to fiber. Just because something is good for us doesn't mean there isn't a limit. I just think the limit that people think is too high isn't actually too high. You know what I mean? People are like, oh, you're eating 100 grams of protein a day. That's way too much protein. Like, that's not true. But protein is the most difficult macronutrient for the body to break down, which is really why it does make it so beneficial in a fat loss phase, because it keeps you full, right? Which is really, really helpful. However, too much protein can slow down digestion, leading to bloating or constipation. And it's not usually like an overall day thing. It's not that you're eating too much in a day. It's that you're eating too much in one sitting. So recently, like, I had a client, he did really well with his day of protein, but he's like, I had one meal where I had like 70 grams or something crazy. It was like 70, 80 grams in one sitting. For him, that's a lot. And I mean, it was sitting heavy and it caused bloating. And it's just because of that reason that it's hard to break down, which again is beneficial, but not if you're eating too much in one sitting. It can cause that bloating. I did say here, like, there is kind of a tipping point of like, if you're eating so much protein and then it's taking away from your carbs and fats, like that can become an issue, because those two, like carbs and fats, are very supportive for thyroid health, stress management, things like that. And so if we're not getting enough of those, we can see that starting to affect thyroid. I would say that's more so from if you're under eating, right? So if you're in like a deficit, for example, because then you're going back to the under eating, right? That's reducing your stomach acid. It basically makes it even more difficult to break down that protein. So there's kind of different factors that play in with that. We always say like 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight is a good area to be in with protein. But if you're low and you're wanting to increase, you actually want to do that slowly. Like, you don't just want to go from like 100 grams of protein to like 160, overnight. Like, that type of thing can cause some GI issues, or just leading to bloating and constipation.
Yeah, what I think as well is that with protein, it even plays into like meal frequency, because I just had a talk with someone, which is why I want to bring this up. It's like, we're just creating structure now. We're looking at, hey, can we actually get you to eat enough? Because he's been kind of like under eating and protein as well. And he's like, I prefer to have like 2 meals a day. However, we would like to get him to like a 140, 50, 60 protein day, So that would be like, I don't know, like a 70 plus gram protein feeding. Like, that's too much. And that is going to cause some issues usually. So I like to go with like 30, 40-ish per meal. And of course, it's going to depend on the person.
Yep.
But usually we use that as kind of like our max, so that you don't have like this huge fucking, portion of protein, which I do get it, right? So we sometimes think like, oh, like I had a really good like big meal of protein. And yes, you want to have it. And yes, at the end of the day, like we want to hit your totals. But if we're thinking, hey, someone has a protein target of 200 grams or something, like we don't want you to have like 100 with dinner. Like we're gonna break that daily goal down into your meals, and that's how you want to be smart about that and break it down into 4 to 5 meals. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. But with that protein, like I think that is one where if you go with a lower frequency, it can cause some issues. So I would definitely say try to go with like 4 or something.
Totally agreed. Yeah.
Speaking of protein, I think also after your workout, this is a big one, right? We always think that we need that protein like right after the workout, which yes, we want to get it after training, but we probably want to kind of chill first.
Yeah.
Because exercise, we've talked about this. We talk about this a lot, and this is one of those where people don't want to hear it usually, and that's okay. But it does still work like that. The body works like that. Exercise is a form of stress, especially if you do something like cardio or high intensity cardio, right? Or high intensity training in general, like CrossFit. We are in that fight or flight response. Like you're fighting the bear, you're running away from the bear. But digestion, right, evolution wise, we're not really necessarily like created to be breaking down this food while we're actually also trying to run away from the bear, Doesn't go hand in hand, and it's not a priority. So what I always like to recommend is at least taking some time, because this maybe comes from that, anabolic window. It's like, you got to get that protein like right after your workout, or otherwise you're going to miss out on your gains. Like, no. But let's have a meal once we're kind of good for that. Instead of rushing to get, your post-workout, do some breathing if you need to, do some stretching if you need to. And you don't even have to do that stuff, but let's make sure that we can kind of calm down, lower that, heart rate, get back into rest and digest state, which is literally, it's literally called rest digest, like you said last time. It's like, that's when you want to be, right, digesting that food. So let's calm down before having that meal, because otherwise, once again, like we're just not going to be like in a good place to do that yet,
Yeah, I think you cut out there. I'm not sure if you said this or not, but so you were talking about the anabolic window, which is like, we know people think it's like right away, right? But in terms of digestion, so say you work out and you really feel like you need something, like something that would be really easily digestible would be like a protein shake, and say maybe like a banana, or even like carb powders of some sort. So you can have the protein powder and the carb powder. And that's not gonna necessarily affect your digestion right after workout. We're talking about like a full-blown meal, right? So like you go and work out and then you have a full-blown meal, that's gonna struggle to digest because you're in that fight or flight state. So it would actually help to probably have like the protein powder, the carb powder prior to calm the system down, and then 2 hours later, whatever, you have that full meal.
Yeah, and I do like the carb powders for that, because it's almost like an off switch for cortisol as well.
Yeah,
to have some carbs.
Exactly.
As much as I'll say, like we don't often use this with most people, the carb powders, because I still prefer like actual food. So maybe even like something like dried fruit.
Yep.
Or like you said, a banana or something. Or those, apple squeezes, whatever. But like something quick, that would be good. But then the actual meal, so it should have been a little bit more specific there. Like the actual meal, like wait with that,
Yeah. I used to eat baby food. sweet potato, apple, and sweet potato and apple baby food in like these pouches, and it was actually really good. But yeah, that would be like a really quick digesting thing that wouldn't affect your digestion right after. But you'd be getting that fuel in. Okay, so next one. This is one that people often don't know about, is drinking too much water. I would say especially during meals. Obviously, you've heard to drink more water. It can help decrease bloating, and it can for sure, but there's a limit. And we actually see this a lot in like the bodybuilding space where they're like just like chugging water, but they're just flushing out electrolytes, and like that could become a big issue. Like we really want a balance of those, because too much water can actually have the opposite effect. It can actually make you dehydrated. Is that happening in the gem pop? I would say no, but it can. Like people are just like, oh, I need to drink so much water. But we definitely need to be balancing those. Um, Anyways, like we've said in the past, we need stomach acid to break down our food, right? Low stomach acid is one of the most common causes of bloat and constipation, and water will dilute the stomach acid. And so, especially during meals. So, if you're eating and drinking a lot of water, it's going to dilute that stomach acid, and it can interrupt the digestion process, or you'll struggle to break down that food efficiently. And this is something I learned just a few years ago, and I stopped doing it. And Eric's always like offering me water. I'm like, no, it's okay. It's okay. Because I'm like, I need my food to digest. Like I already have stomach issues, but yeah, this is one that not many people know about.
It's definitely one that I'm still guilty of. Like
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, I have this habit of just drinking a whole lot of water, you know? And I've
Mm-hmm.
been like, I need to continuously like remind myself to not have too much.
Mm-hmm.
And especially meals. I remember, and I know I was doing this as a kid already. So it's maybe just something that's kind of like ingrained in me. But yeah, chugging water, like it's one of those, like you said, with your electrolytes.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Mm-hmm.
definitely overdoing that, you know, and this is maybe a good one to bring up as well. Like your pee also shouldn't be like completely clear, you know, like you want it to be kind of like off yellow kind of, you know.
Right.
But yeah, definitely one. I mean, this is one I'd say, like you said already, like most people aren't gonna not know about this one, I feel like. Because we always hear, you know, you're supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
drinking water. And yeah, this is absolutely true, but maybe not like liters with your meal.
Right. Yeah. Um, okay, and then this is the last one, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So the last one is eating too frequently. This, I would say, yes, this can affect digestion, and I will talk about it in a sec, but there are instances where this can be helpful for people. So I'm not saying don't do this, but if you're finding yourself having GI issues pop up, or like blood sugar dysregulation where like you're never feeling full, this is something to consider. So there's something called the migrating motor complex, and what that is it's a natural process of the body, and it's meant to sweep out the debris from the small intestine into the large, where then it can be excreted out of the body. But this can only happen during periods of fasting. So when there's no food in the system, that doesn't mean we're just going to go in and, do these like prolonged fasts. We're talking like 3 to 4 hours between meals. So if we're constantly putting food into our system, the MMC never has a chance to do its job, and debris will not only struggle to leave the system, but it can end up sitting in the small intestine too long, which can produce these bacteria. It basically feeds bacteria, and this can become a problem if it's chronically happening, because it can result in something called SIBO, which is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, and we don't want bacteria in that small intestine. We want it in that large intestine. So it's so important to be clearing that small intestine out. And so again, if we're eating, we don't have that MMC happening. We have food just sitting in our system, which can cause the bloating, can cause the constipation. Um, so spacing meals out every 3 to 4 hours is really helpful with this. And then something I've been doing for years is like, usually I stop eating around like 6 or 7 at night. And then I won't eat again until 8 in the morning. But having 12 hours without food in the system is really helpful for that. Um, which is, unless you're late night eating, like I would say most people are probably doing this anyways. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
unless you're eating at like 10 at night, 11 at night, and then having your breakfast at 7, you're not allowing that enough time, which can affect digestion. So when I was going through a lot of, I'm still am, but it is something I adopted and definitely felt a difference, especially in my sleep and in my blood sugar. Um, Not only did the spacing the 3-hour meals out help my bloating and whatnot, it helped my blood sugar, which then in return helped my hunger and cravings. If we're constantly eating all day and we're having these blood sugar spikes across our day, that can lead to more hunger and more cravings, and we're not actually getting in full meals that are keeping us satiated, right? So it can play into blood sugar, but it's just that we're never getting full. And so we're always just like feeling hungry. And then sometimes that can tend to lead to overeating, you know? And so the bigger meals across your day, like every 3 to 4 hours. So for example, I eat typically around like 8:39, then I eat around like 12, and I'll have like a midday snack around 3 or 3:30, and then I'll eat around like 6:30. And that's just kind of how it's spaced out. And like my hunger, I start getting hungry now, at those specific
Hmm.
times. And so I've like trained my hunger cues, which is good, and I'm giving my gut that time to rest. And then I'm also regulating blood sugar throughout that. I mean, quality of food does come into play with that. But from a digestion standpoint, that is why we want to space meals out across your day versus like eating, kind of all day long, snacking, grazing.
Yeah. I think I have a question here. So could you clarify what that snack for you looks like?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is
Yeah,
that?
so yeah, so it's pretty much just a small meal,
Yep.
honestly. So I'm still getting in a carbohydrate, a protein source, a fat source, and usually a fiber source. So I'll switch it up, but I've been eating pretty much the same two snacks for years. And I'll either make a smoothie or a smoothie bowl. And so I'll have my protein powder, blueberries, banana, some sort of milk, with some sort of nut butter, and then sometimes I'll add granola on top. And then the other one that I have is oats. So same type of thing. So I'll have chia seeds in my oats, and then I'll have protein powder, and then I'll add some sort of fat source. So it's still a nice balanced snack slash meal. Then there's times where like I'm in a rush. If I'm in a rush and I can't make these things, I always have some sort of like meat stick on hand. So I'll do like a meat stick, which has protein and fat usually in it, and I'll do a couple. And then I'll have like a fruit, so an apple. So I can just like take that with me, right? So that's kind of like my easy midday snack. But I like eating volume, and so the smoothie bowls and the oatmeal give me that satisfaction of having, a meal where I can sit down and eat it, and it takes some time to eat versus rushing through and having something small.
Yeah. So without knowing your snacks, I knew it was going to be something like this where this like your snack is likely still more that some people have for like breakfast, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, yes, it's a snack, but it's like you said, it's more like a smaller meal. You're still getting your protein, carbs, fats, your fiber. It's still filling. It's not like
Mhm.
what you usually, what people tend to think of. Hey, I need a little
Mhm.
snack to keep me going, and it's like a cookie or whatever it is. Like
Right.
no, like this is still something that will actually give you energy, fill you up, lots of micronutrients. And by the way, like, you can have the cookie too, like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's important to make sure that, again, we're not just grabbing random stuff through it today, like little mini bites in here and there, and give your digestion a break. And it's also going to be much easier even to just have in your food diary if you're tracking your food. I mean,
It's
because
so much easier to plan.
Yeah, like you have your 4 meals, whatever it is. You can just schedule that. You can structure it, whatever you want to do. But it's going to be so much easier than, hey, I'm going to go collect some macros here and there, and I'll have some fat, some protein, whatever. Have that structure, make it simple. And again, like, even for digestion and stuff, it's so much better to just have this in place.
Yeah, like my snacks are still 300, 400, 500 calories sometimes, like it's a higher calorie, lower volume, but there's still some volume to it. It's just not like a, chicken, rice, vegetable type of thing. And I enjoy it. It's like, it's satisfying, which I think is so important.
100%. Okay. So we talked about a bunch of different factors here, right? Over the last, episodes. I mean, today 85 and then 83, right? Let's say we have someone who is dealing with digestive issues, right? And of course, it's a huge it depends question, but where would you start people off? What factors do you look first, or where do you check first? What questions do you ask, right? Like, what do you want to know from the person so they can start figuring it out with you?
Well, with my coaching, we've kind of made this easier on ourselves because we track things like sleep, where they're tracking their food. Each week we're checking in from like a stress and psychological standpoint. So we have the ability to see all of these factors, right? That being said, what I typically do is if someone is complaining of this stuff and I don't see there's like an over exercising issue, or they're super stressed or anything like that, like there isn't these other factors at play that really stick out. Because like if you're not sleeping, that's a major one that we have to attack first, I would say, right? Like that's going to affect everything else. It's going to just put so much stress on the body. So that's one that you can really look at and say, okay, I'm having digestive issues. What does my lifestyle look like? Am I sleeping? How much stress am I under? If I'm under a lot of stress, okay, some of it's probably coming from that. How can I work to manage it? Like sometimes we can't control the stress that we have in our life, but we can control like how we deal with it outside of it, and practicing stress management tools, right? That being said, what I typically have clients do is have them, so they're already tracking their food, but when they start to have these symptoms arise, I have them note it in their chronometer, or if like, even if you just wrote a food journal and you started tracking when your symptoms were, okay, and then you can start making correlations, and you do this over a few weeks, honestly. So you can say, okay, this is happening when I'm eating this, a few hours after I'm eating this, is it this specific food? And trying to, do it that way, it can be really helpful just from like a visual standpoint if it's actually something that you're eating. So that's like figuring, okay, it's something that I'm eating, but it's like, why then? Why is that bothering you? Why is gluten bothering you? Why is dairy bothering you? That's really just a symptom to an underlying issue, right? And so that's when we kind of go deeper. But I'm asking them these questions, right? Like, what does your morning routine look like? What does your nighttime routine look like? I'm tracking their bloating and all of that and with their food logs, so I can see that. So that's something you can do on your own. Under eating and chronic dieting, sometimes that's hard to tell on your own, if that's really contributing, because sometimes people just don't know if they're under eating. But again, looking at what's my veggie and fruit intake look like? What's my protein intake look like? If you are thinking, oh, I'm only having a veggie every 3 days, that's probably contributing to some of it where we're not getting in enough fiber and we're just not getting in enough micronutrients. So we're seeing that affect the gut. So it's a complex thing, but it also can be a simple thing. If you're not sleeping, we need to work on that. That will help you right from the start.
Cool. I think we covered a lot of good stuff. Is there anything else that you wanted to add there? Do you feel like we covered all of them?
I think the last thing I want to say is this is something that I see all the time, because there's a bunch of like influencers out there pushing probiotics and like all of these gut things, like these gut products. You have to be very careful with that. I know it's easy to think, okay, I'm dealing with these gut issues. I need more probiotics because marketing is so good. And that's one of like the main supplements out there that's being pushed. But just blindly taking a probiotic isn't a good idea. It's not to say that like you can't take one and see what happens, but there's specific strains for different things. And if you have an overgrowth in a specific strain and now you take a probiotic and now you're adding more of that bacteria to something that you already have an overgrowth in, like it can cause more issues. So it's something that I think is just important to know and understand. Like, I'm not saying don't give it a try, but if you try a probiotic and you see different things and not just gut issues pop up, like it can be your skin, it can be, foggy brain. These are all symptoms that people don't necessarily associate with gut issues. They just associate like pain or bloating or constipation with gut, but it can be other than that. So just be careful. That's all I'm saying, is the gut isn't something to mess around with. And so taking probiotics and gut supplements can be harmful sometimes. So you just have to be careful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those where it makes sense too if you don't know about these kind of things, right? It's the marketing. It's like, hey, I'm dealing with this thing. I know that I'm dealing with, I don't know, IBS, whatever it is. My digestion is not in a good spot. And here I see an ad, right, for whatever it is. Oh, that must be the thing. It's the same as with the weight loss stuff, but 100%, like with any of those supplements, personally, I would not recommend just buying any of that just because you read it. Depending on your expertise and kind of like where you read it and stuff, maybe, which is hard to figure out on your own sometimes. But like, I would go, like, if you have actual gut issues, it's an ongoing problem, you can't figure it out on your own, like, don't just buy the supplement. Like,
no, yeah,
talk to someone, right? Go to a doctor, specialist, coach who can like you know a lot of stuff about this, right? So like, get the help, because it might just make it worse, or I mean, like either that, right, or just it's going to cost you money and it's not going to do anything,
right?
Okie dokie. Let's chat soon. I'll talk to you soon, Kristine. And to the listener, thanks for listening once again. Drop us a quick rating and review if you would like to do so, and then we'll talk to you on Thursday.